Welcome into Emerald and Lilywhite. This is episode 28. Spurs are off the back of a few, we could say, less than positive results, and we are here to talk about it. As always, I'm Scott at Scotchy Bird. With me, as always, is my co-host Max at Going Limbs. Two of us are flying as the duo today. Max, what's up, man?
Yeah, not much. So 5 straight games, 0 W's for Tottenham Hotspur. Ange's seat is getting hotter by the minute. We have no center backs, no sixes. So that's just where we're at this point. Vibes are splendid in North
Splendid
London.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Spurs go up to the Ibrox today up in Glasgow. Eke out a 1-1 draw. You could even say stole a point off of a better Rangers side if we really want to say that. But before we talk Rangers, we're going to take a couple steps back and talk about another not so wonderful result, the defeat to Chelsea at the weekend. Spurs go up 2-0, and I'm just going to post the lineup here before we really get into it. But Spurs go up 2-0 on that match, really from no more than Marc Cucurella not being able to stay on his feet. Cleats, we can talk about all that, right? But I think he just sucks. But Cucurella can't stay on his feet, and Spurs benefit from it twice, go up 2-0, and then obviously, as one would expect at this point, collapse and end up in a 4-3 defeat to their arch rivals. Also, always worth keeping in mind that while we see Arsenal as our primary rival, Chelsea sees us as their primary rival, right? So always a big game when you play Chelsea, and you can see what it meant to them. Enzo Fernandez, who I have no respect for, the celebration after he put that in the back of the net. Wonderful strike by him, right? But showed you everything you need to know about how Chelsea feels about Spurs. And unfortunately, again, we drop all 3 points to our London rivals. Line up across the bottom there. Fraser Forster starts in net by default. Porro, Romero, Van de Ven, Udogie across the back line. The midfield consists of Basuma, Sarr, and Kulusevski. And then up top is Son, Johnson, Solanke. I would ask you biggest surprises in this lineup, but I probably already know the answer. Romero and Van de Ven both get the start kind of out of nowhere. Let's talk about those two for a second. Obviously, super disappointing to lose both of them. My question for you to kick this thing off, should they have started? Was that, a misplay from Ange and the medical staff there?
What the fuck is Ange doing, dude?
Mm-hmm.
like you just said it. Like, oh yes, we got our center backs back. They get injured in the very game. Romero lasted 13 minutes, dude. Yeah. Ange, we know your job's on the line, bro, but we can't have our key players out. Van de Ven's out for 2 to 3 weeks. He lasted longer than Romero. Romero's out for 6 weeks now. 6 more weeks for fucking 13 minutes. In a game that we were going to lose anyway. I'm sorry, man. I know that technically when Romero was on the pitch, it was 2-0. So, hey, good on him, I guess. But, dude, you can't do that shit, especially when I guess there was a little less choice because Ben Davies got hurt in the Bournemouth match. Yeah. But, dude, I think for Romero especially, Dragusin, he's been okay recently. You can't risk that because now he's out for 6 weeks. He clearly seemed to be worse off than Van de Ven, who's also out for 2 to 3 weeks. So now 3 of our 4 center backs are hurt for at least 3 weeks. And so we've got Archie Gray, the 18-year-old, playing fucking center back after he's played right back the entire season because Ange doesn't want to play Jed Spence. And now we've got our 6 of the future that we spent 40 million on hasn't played a fucking minute at 6, bro. And we're spreading them all across the back line, left back, right back, center back. And it's just a disaster. It's a disaster. And 100% Romero and Van de Ven should not have started this game. Maybe you can justify Van de Ven because of the Ben Davies injury, but Romero, no shot, man. No shot. That's a huge misstep by Ange.
100%. And I would have to believe that the physios are not stupid enough to have fully cleared either of them to play. Maybe so. If they did, that's a whole other problem itself, right? But I mean,
it was Van de Ven was on a minutes restriction, but then he got hurt But after the game, Andrew's like, that was always the plan to hook him off. And then the next day, there's like, actually, he's hurt. So, like, which one? I don't know.
One, and he re-injured the same injury, from my understanding, the same hamstring. And then Romero, different injury, right? It's now I believe a quad, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it's something else, but
yeah, it's not the toe. Hearing that it's a quad, my only thought there is, anytime you're not fully fit from an injury, you use your body incorrectly, and that probably leads to something else developing, right? So I'm speculating, but I'm not surprised at all if the quad injury came from the toe not being fully healed or whatever, just because of the way that he was probably favoring that foot and that toe or whatever. Again, speculating here. We don't know that for sure, but poor decisions, I think, from Ange or whomever made that final decision. Obviously, Ange does, right? But whomever was involved in leading Ange to make that decision, shame on them. Those two, like you said, we had one of them for 13 minutes and the other one for one half of football before they were ripped from us again. And also, like you said, we're probably not winning that match regardless of who starts. I would have been fine with Dragoshin and Gray at center back in that match, which is what we all expected anyways. But I think some positives to take away from that, Spurs do find a goal late in the match. I don't think Spurs were good. I think the biggest thing that I took away from this match was that out of possession, our shape was fucking atrocious. Just so bad. And that's, you and I were talking off air, that's not injuries. Injuries are injuries, right? But that doesn't lead to a poor shape. All of these guys are professional footballers. All of them can keep shape. All of them can keep position. It's super simple. Being in position, anyone can do it. You don't even need to be a professional footballer to do that correctly, right? And so I'm not going to sit here and listen to people tell me that the lack of shape or being able to keep shape is because of injuries. That's just asinine. That's strictly on the players, but also on the management. And I thought we were horrible in this match against Chelsea. And without Cucurella falling twice, we probably get beat 4 or 5-0 in that game, in my opinion.
Yeah. And also missed chances. Sonny misses a 1v1 that I think could have won us the game. And then you look at the fucking goals we concede, 2 penalties to Cole Palmer, Basuma and Sarr, idiotic. Both of them idiotic. And when that's 66% of your midfield that you're starting in this game, you're not going to fucking win the game because they're being idiots. Like anyone with a brain, like you in that position, are not fucking pushing him in the back when you can read his last name. And if I'm in the position Basuma's in, I'm not cleaning him out while he's dribbling out of bounds, dude. Like, we know that. If it was Chang, he's probably taking him out. But at least for most of us, we're keeping our heads there. And they're professional footballers, so we definitely should be able to have, like, the common sense to just defend normally. So Basuma and Sarr massively let us down there. Kulusevski, I thought, was great. Johnson had a nice ball into Solanke, didn't do much else. Solanke, a good finish on that one. And then Sonny, I mean, he did grab a goal towards the end, but it's just his finishing has been off. I don't know what it is, if it's health, if he's washed, but he didn't look good today against Rangers either. So that was kind of the rundown. Basuma and Sarr, it's just atrocious, isn't it? Like, there's nothing. That's not on Ange. That's not on anyone but them just being so stupid in those 2 instances, which, yep, they won 4-3. So there you go. That's the 3 points gone there.
Yep. We completely gave away that match. We let Chelsea walk right into the win. Sarr and Basuma's penalties, Ange talked about it, but those are moments, I think, and this is again what Ange said, and I agree with him. Those are moments where the team's in a poor run of form and just super, I don't want to say super immature players, because I don't want to just encompass them into immature players, but very immature moments where you want to just flash and make a big play and get the stadium on their feet. And that's just not the time to do that at all. Like you said, Basuma tackles the guy that's dribbling out of bounds, and Sarr goes through the back of a guy who's moving away from the net, moving out of the box, right? It's just absolutely no reason for either of those things to happen. And it's just playing with emotions and not a clear mind, right? And that's, I think, a huge part of our issue right now. I think it's why we're not finishing, which as you mentioned, it's a huge part of our problem right now. We know Ange teams aren't going to keep a clean sheet. He doesn't care about defense. If you're not taking your chances in an Ange system, you're fucked, and that's a huge part of our problem right now too.
And going off that, it's like we can't hold a lead. Like we're jumping out to leads that we can't fucking cling on to save our lives, because all these players are not like willing to like just. I don't even know how to describe it. They're just so panicked all the time that even when we're winning, like, why don't we take a few minutes to just swing it around the back? Like, I don't get it. Like, if you're playing 6, like, or if you're playing 8, like Sar, why are you trying to like force a through ball when we're up 2-0? That's not helping anyone right now. Just sit on the ball and make smart fouls. Like, how often do you see us make a foul at the halfway line when they're on a counterattack? I know Ben Davies did it. He got a yellow, but that was a great foul in that game against Bournemouth. I want to see more plays like that break up like the momentum. But no, we're only making those challenges when we're like in our own box, giving away free goals. It's like you have like a guy like Davies who would do something like that, and he's like calm on the ball and experienced. I feel like he's one of the very few in our entire team that actually knows how to see out a game, which has been a huge problem for us lately. Like, can't hold a lead at all.
Yeah, and I mean, some of that's on the players, but I think some of that can fall at the manager's feet too. There was a very good debate on Morning Footy this morning where Nico Cantor, who I have a ton of respect for, I think he's an absolutely fantastic pundit who really knows the game well. He's the son of Andres Cantor, who's one of the most famous announcers to have ever called matches. He's famous for the goal celebrations and an Argentine, right? But anyways, Nico feels strongly that Ange isn't adapting well enough to the league, and again, this is somebody who I can't stress it enough. If the listener hasn't ever watched Morning Footy on Paramount Plus, tune in. Monday through Friday. I believe it airs at 8 a.m. Eastern, 5 a.m. Pacific, but then repeats every 2 hours for the next 6 hours, right? So tune in sometime. Nico's a fantastic pundit, and he's definitely not one to give generic takes or blanketed takes, right? And he talked a lot about how the Premier League is vastly diverse, vastly talented in ways that Ange Postecoglou as a manager has never experienced. And there might need to be some adaptability and flexibility, right? And I believe that to be true. I think there's very few teams who go up 2-0 against their rival and don't say, okay, we need to figure out a way to kill some time. And I don't want to say you don't set up shop at 10 minutes, right? And just like defend the game out. But like you said, there's a fine line between sitting back and seeing a game out and just playing pragmatic football and just keeping the ball amongst many other things. But the way that we fly forward in those situations and leave the midfield just gaping and wide open and super exposed, we were just asking for it the whole match. So I think something's going to have to give at some point.
And I just think that like his substitutions continue to be, if you've been watching this podcast at all this entire season, I've been saying it like almost every show. When we're winning, he doesn't make subs. It's just bizarre. Like you realize when we have a lot of momentum, let's take like the Roma game, for example. We have a lot of momentum against us. It looks like they're clearly knocking on the door, but we're winning. So we don't need to make a change because it'll all be fine. That doesn't make sense. It didn't really apply to this Chelsea game, but even so, like maybe when it's clear that we're about to go down even more at 2-2, try and make a couple subs there to kind of break up the momentum, take the sting out of the game. How many times like have we said that? Or even when we're already winning the game, you can still make changes that might help us a bit more defensively or something along those lines. Like getting Archie Gray in the midfield or something when we're up 2-0 and and we can see out this game and get 3 points against a Chelsea team that's in the title race. But it never seems to happen. We only seem to make changes after we go down a goal, which is crazy to me. I mean, we see it again tonight. We see it against Chelsea. We make those changes once they go up 3-2. It's just, I don't understand it. I just don't understand. It's just so reactive. It feels like Ange believes his system. If it's winning, then just let it ride. Let these players play out the whole game. And then if something happens, then I'll make a change. And it's just too reactive. And that's not how you win football games in the Premier League. And I 100% agree that Ange isn't adapting well enough. It seems like he adapts well for the big games. Like he adapts well against City. Would change our formations up against City, Liverpool, these bigger teams, Arsenal sometimes as well. But when it's any old Prem game, like against a Bournemouth or a Fulham, he thinks that this is still the Australian K-League or something or whatever it's called, and that he can just beat these teams. But no, like Bournemouth has really good players, and so does Fulham.
They're a good
and
team.
You're not going to be able to play your style against these mid-table teams and be arrogant enough to think that that's going to win every game and only adapt when you're playing Pep Guardiola, because Fulham, Marco Silva is a wonderful manager. Bournemouth's manager, I forgot his name, but he's been flying lately. He's definitely going to get a big job soon. Yeah, Areola, thank you. And that's what the Prem is filled with. So, that's just what I think.
And Bournemouth is a good team. I mean, they beat
really
City
good
at the Vitality. They beat Arsenal at the Vitality. So I think, Liverpool. That's Liverpool's only loss this season is to Bournemouth.
I thought it was Forest. It was Forest.
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry.
They beat Nuno.
Yeah, my boy. I do think though it's worth, and this kind of bleeds into two other topics here, but I also think some of that's on the players, right? I'm not going to pin all that on Ange, and I'm talking about these matches we should win on paper, right? I think we have a good enough team to go out and beat these teams, and it's not happening. I do think, it gets messy because we can look at the board, we can look at the players, we can look at Ange, and they all play a factor here. But I do believe that our players are good enough to go out and win these games if they're not winning. And I think the tactics are good enough to get results too. I'm not sitting here saying Ange is a poor manager. I don't want Ange to be sacked. I think Ange is a fantastic dude with a super high ceiling. I think Ange maybe doesn't have a stable base right now that some other managers would have. And this is a conversation from another tweet that I saw, and I really wish I could give credit to the author of this tweet. I can't, right? But just the idea that Ange has a super high ceiling, but it takes time to get there, and his base is a little bit wobbly right now. And you look at a guy like a Graham Potter, for example, probably a fairly steady base, but nowhere near the ceiling of an Ange Postecoglou. So Ange needs to be given time. I'm not saying anything otherwise. And I do think the players have to be looked at here too, right? Especially in those matches against Bournemouth and those matches against Roma today, for example, right? I think we put a good enough team out to win, and it's not happening. And then, like we've talked about, we go out and thump City. Players should be able to get up for these matches, and we're not seeing that too. So some of where, and this is where I really want to go with it, some of what I see with maybe the lack of substitutions is that Ange doesn't have a lot of faith in guys that are available to him right now. And I think that's probably fair. Not only is he missing a few key players, but even you could say Ange's guys are still pretty young and getting up to speed, right? So there's a lot that goes into it too. And, I just get the sense that Ange probably doesn't trust a lot of what's at his disposal. And that probably leads into some of the lack of subs too.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So then I guess we have to look at the chairman potentially, right? And we all saw Cody Romero come out with a quote on a South American podcast, I believe an Argentine podcast, where he, for all intents and purposes, and I'm paraphrasing here, but just pointed at the board and said, that seems to be where the issue is. And I look at all these other teams the Liverpools, the Chelseas, the Arsenals, the Cities, right? And their board pumps them full of depth, and that's why they're competing for titles. And he said we are a good enough team with the infrastructure to compete for titles, but our board doesn't back us enough to do that. And again, I'm paraphrasing, but I think that was really important for someone with the leadership acumen of Cudi Romero to come out and say that.
Yeah, I 100% agree. It was a great quote from him. I don't know how much time Ange has left, but Romero essentially said, if Ange goes, I'm going too. So we'll see what happens with that. But looking forward to our schedule, Southampton away. If we don't win this game, it's going to be real bad in the Spurs community. Then the cup game against United. If we don't win that game, oh my God, it's going to be literal pandemonium. Oh, let's recoup after getting knocked out by United with Liverpool, who's top of the league. And then away to Nottingham Forest, who will probably smack us, and our former manager, Nuno Espirito Santo. And then we have Wolves at home, and then Newcastle at home, and then Tamworth in the cup. So that is our next little run of fixtures. Honestly, looking really terrible, especially if we don't start off on the right foot this weekend against Southampton. And especially if we get knocked out against United, because the worst possible fixture to follow that up with is Liverpool, who look dead set on being the champions this year. So I don't even know what's going to happen personally, but to think that we're not going to have any center backs for all of that is really scary. And obviously I don't think United's like settling in great under Emery, but it's going to be a tough one. It's going to be a tough one to pull out for sure. Luckily, they have City away this weekend right before, which is kind of nice, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're getting into the big picture stuff, and I want to back up for a second because we are going to have a bigger conversation around the big picture here in just a moment. But before we do, let's talk about Rangers briefly. Post the lineup there at the bottom. Spurs 1-1 draw at the Ibrox today. We all know that it just happened, right? The lineup of Forster in goal, Porro, Gray, Dragoshin, and Udogie across the back, Bentancur, Basuma, Madison in the midfield, and then Werner, Johnson, and Son up top. I personally never love to see Bentancur and Basuma in the same midfield. I think there's redundancy there, and I think it pulls away from creativity. I think that rang true today for sure. We were very much devoid of ideas, I think, going forward. But I'm also not going to pin the result on the two of them starting at the same time. But what was your take on the lineup when you saw it posted?
Yeah, I wasn't too surprised. I understand Bentancur and Basuma together because they're both unavailable for Southampton. Yeah. So you want to get the most out of those guys while rotating the other guys who are going to start this weekend. I was hoping like Bentancur would play a little bit more in that like 8 role in that creator that we've seen him do in the past. Just wasn't happening. Like it's I don't know. And I just feel like with Bentancur and Basuma, like the passing right now is just not good enough. And I feel like that's kind of where our shortcomings are, is that oftentimes when they get on the ball, they just decide to kind of jog up the pitch and carry the ball up rather than passing it forward. And I feel like if we get more quick passes in, like what we saw when Bergvall was on the pitch and how he was spraying it to the wings and switching the field and stuff, it just felt a lot more urgent. And like we had a much better tempo rather than when we see Basuma and Bentancur kind of carrying the ball up the field. Then Madison's looking for people, but when you have Son up top, it literally looked like a ghost town in their box. Like I didn't even know, like it was like a 2v7 every time we tried to attack. So it was really, really bad to watch until we got those changes in, who kind of changed the game. Kulu, Bergvall, and Solanke all played really well when they came on. But before that, it was a real struggle for any sort of attacking threat from the midfield or the attack.
Dude, I was asked in a group chat this week who I thought my disappointment of the season was so far, and I said Son very quickly. I never want to pick on Son, and there's definitely varying opinions there that are all valid, right? But Son is just as my wife says, synonymous. Just completely anonymous, though. He like you said, he receives the ball in the final third, and he just stands dormant and waits for things to happen around him, right? He just doesn't seem to have any idea of what he wants to do with the ball at his feet. It's concerning. He's obviously aging, right? I still think of Sonny as this Puskás Award winner burning down the field against Burnley, but that was 5 years ago. Time flies. So Sonny is starting to concern me a little bit. I also want to talk about James Maddison. In this lineup, he's got to be the guy to drive the creativity, and that's just not happening. We depend on Kulusevski so much to progress the ball into the final third, and progression has to come from Bentancur and Basuma and the wing backs, fullbacks as well, right? But I'm not seeing enough from James Maddison right now, in my opinion. And then Timo Werner is just absolutely killing us in the final third with his finishing. We've got an interesting quote here that I'm going to post across the bottom, and you brought it to my attention here, but and on Timo Werner, and this is a direct quote, comes from Alistair Gold's Twitter. Timo Werner, wasn't playing anywhere near the levels he can when you've got 18-year-olds. It's not acceptable to me. I told him that. He's a senior international, a German international. The quote continues, right? But from that snapshot there, it's clear to me, and I think you agree, that Timo Werner is probably done under Ange Postecoglou, or at least would be if there was anyone else available.
Yeah, I mean, he's referencing 18-year-olds, Bergvall, Archie Gray, and then we don't have any healthy ones on the wing right now with Moore and Odegaard out. Yang is going to come in and he's going to get those minutes. I'm pretty sure that's like the foregone conclusion. People were shouting for a Bergvall loan earlier this year. That can't be in the picture. Like, he's one of our most creative midfielders that we have left right now. Yeah. So he has to be here in January and for the rest of the season. Yang is going to play a huge role. Mikey Moore hopefully rests up and starts to play a huge role. And we need to start diminishing Werner's role. If we can send him back to Germany in January and get another winger, that would be absolutely stupendous. And then rely on Moore, Yang, Sonny on the left. Hopefully, please God, give me a left-footed right winger to go with Johnson on the right, and then it'll start to look a lot better there. But yeah, as for Werner, you guys all know what I think about him. He was really, really poor today. After I think he was okay for a couple weeks, but if he's a mainstay in the starting 11 for us, we're not going anywhere. We're not going to win any trophies.
Yeah, he has absolutely no confidence, and I say that very confidently because his first touch is awful. He can't even receive the ball with nobody on him right now. It's very, very troubling, and I wish him the best, but it's not going to be at Spurs. He needs to go somewhere that's less demanding outside of England for sure. I don't even know if Germany is the right place. I'm thinking things like Major League Soccer are probably where Timo Werner's at right now, unfortunately. But yeah, it's
the Dynamo need a new DP or what?
I'd take him at Houston, maybe. No,
well, we're getting Richarlison in Seattle, so yeah, we'll see what happens.
That's my boy right there, Richarlison, for those who can view. Shout out to Digital Spurs, by the way. Wonderful piece of merch from Danny over at Digital Spurs. But yeah, I think it's very clear that we're begging for a Wilson Odegaard. I agree that Yang Min Hyuk is going to come in and get significant minutes. We don't know anything about him, but at this point, it has to be that way. There's no other option, right? Be nice to get Richarlison back to supplement some minutes on the wing. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, unfortunately. Again, we have to double and triple click on this. We are in an absolute injury crisis right now, and that does factor into some of this. There's only one other team in the league, in my opinion, that's been hit as hard as us, and that's Man City, who is in a crisis of their own, without a doubt. There's no way around that. Especially after losing yesterday to Juventus, they are really, really hurting over there. So these things happen, but not great. Let's shift to big picture, though. I really want to talk about that because I think that's going to be the big bulk of the conversation here and probably can take up a lot of time. Spurs, we sit 11th in the table in the Premier League. I don't think that's a fluke. I think that's exactly where we belong based on the way that we played football. We sit 9th in Europa League. We are, of course, now listed across the bottom in the quarterfinals of the League Cup and have yet to compete in the FA Cup. We do have a very, very, very favorable third round draw, we could say. But the first
I genuinely think if you play striker, right?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, if Chang was the 6 and I was the 10 and you were the striker and we had the rest of the Spurs squad against Tamworth, I think we still win.
We would win. I agree 100%.
Yeah.
So we better win that match. Something even tells me that Robbie you could stick Robbie.
Robbie could do a throw him in net or something. He's never played soccer.
Yeah, I was gonna say you can put him at keeper. We'll have to give him a shout in the group chat and let him know that he featured in the pod today, even if he wasn't here. But Robbie, you're playing keeper against Tamsworth, my dude. Get ready, get the gloves on, let's go. But yeah, I agree. Spurs have to win that match. It absolutely has to happen. If we lose that match, Ant has to be sacked, in my opinion. And I don't want that to happen.
Instant sack. Colchester-esque.
Yeah, no shit. But yeah, so, all that said, things aren't horrible outside of the league. I can make the argument that things don't look great in Europa League. We're going to get into the knockouts. I firmly believe that. I really, really want to avoid the round of 32. Desperately want to avoid the round of 32. That doesn't look to be off the cards yet, but it's not on the cards mathematically right now. We do sit in 9th place at the end of match day 6, I believe, with 2 matches to play. So, but it's really the league where I want to talk. We're awful. I'm not going to pretend to say anything else. Let's look back through our results. 1-1 draw today at Rangers. 4-3 loss to Chelsea at home. 1-0 loss to Bournemouth at the Vitality. 1-1 draw to Fulham. 2-2 draw to Roma. We do beat Man City 4-0. 2-1 loss to Ipswich. 3-2 loss to Galatasaray. 4-1 Aston Villa. 2-1 Man City. 1-0 loss to Crystal Palace. Just awful. So as you can as the listener can tell, lots of losses, lots of draws in what I just read through. Surprisingly, the 2 wins that I read, Manchester City, again, in a crisis of their own. But it's just an absolute fucking mess. I don't know how to make heads or tails of anything that I'm seeing. But like I said, we sit bang on 11th place in the league, and that's right where we deserve to be. We're hanging out with –
feels high, to be honest.
Yeah, 100%. We're hanging out with the old Eric Ten Hag crew. Obviously not there anymore, right? But as much as we want to Banter United, Spurs are right there with them right now, and it doesn't look good.
And below them in the Europa League, by the way, when they drew their first 3 matches and we won our first 3 matches.
Yep.
So yeah, it's a disaster. If you're sitting 11th in the Prem, you better be top of the Europa League. That's just my opinion. It can't be mediocre in both competitions. I'd understand, we're going for trophies, right? So this quarterfinal next week is absolutely massive for Ange's future, for what the club's going to do, for a lot of different things. So setting that aside, when you're in 2 competitions and you're mediocre in both of them, that's not acceptable. No matter what the injury crisis is, no matter what's happening, that is not acceptable. And you're seeing it at Man City right now. They're still in the top 4 in the Prem, and this is their worst ever season I've maybe even been alive for. And then they're struggling a little bit in the Champions League, and it's like the sky is falling over there. But luckily they have Pep Guardiola, who's a proven manager. So they're not going to sack him. For Ange, he hasn't proven us anything. So when you continue to deliver mediocrity and across multiple competitions repeatedly, what is that? 3 wins in our last 12 games. And you haven't given us a trophy. You haven't given us anything. Haven't even finished top 4 with us before. Haven't even made a quarterfinal with us before until this season. Then fans are going to get antsy. And I'm not saying I'm Ange out, but this can't go on. No matter the squad, there's no more fucking excuses here that are valid. There's no excuse to be 11th in the Prem and also 9th in the Europa League. If you're third, second, first in the Europa League and you're 11th in the Prem, maybe you can be like, okay, we're kind of focusing on one or the other. But no, that's not the case. We're just mid in both. And I'd say mid to bad in the Prem right now, which is absolutely absurd. We're taking a long break from the Europa League for the next month and a half to focus on these cups, FA Cup, League Cup, obviously, and the Premier League. So let's see if he can bring it back a bit in the Premier League, get us through the knockout stages in a couple of these cups, and then we can reevaluate once the Europa League kicks off. But if it continues as it's going right now, it won't be here by the time we get to the next Europa League game.
Yeah, unfortunately, I agree with that. I think that it has to be said that Ange, we've had 2 windows under Ange, right? Two transfer windows, I guess 3 now, right? If the window before his first ever match for the club, right? So 3 windows under Ange Postecoglou. There has to be more investment. I don't know who decided to spend our entire transfer kitty on teenagers. I think it was fucking stupid. I think they're all wonderful players who have very high ceilings, and I understand that we're prepping for the future, right? But outside of Solanke, we haven't signed anybody who can come in and make a real impact with the squad, right? There's an argument that maybe Wilson Odobert, but he's still very young. And I say that because he looked good in the Premier League already, right? But outside of Solanke, we didn't sign anybody to come in and make the first team better immediately, right? And that's a massive problem. I love spending $40 million on Archie Gray. I think that's fantastic. I think it shows me the club is heading in the right direction. That's a lot of money too. And when we're talking about Spurs, who historically don't have, a huge war chest set aside when it comes to each and every transfer window, we spend a lot of money on young players. I don't know if that was Ange. I don't know if that was the board. I think, we've talked about it already, and I don't think we talked about it in the last show, but we certainly have on our group chat on the Golden Guest podcast. They came out and said, the Spurs board is very reactionary, right? From the sacking of Pochettino to the hiring of winning managers to the sacking of those winning managers to, oh shit, we better back up and become more like Brighton, right? Because everybody says we should be. And here we are spending, again, tons and tons of money on younger players who I don't know if we're doing that to try to build the club up to a Premier League winning side, or if we're interested in buying players who we can sell for profit in the future. I don't know what's going on, right? But as much as we spent money, quote unquote, I don't think we've done well in the transfer market by any means. And I think that's some of why we're struggling. So that falls at the feet of the manager. And like we talked about, Cuti Romero came out and took a shot at Daniel Levy and the board. And I love to see that. But I frankly am nowhere near Ange out, but I'm sick and fucking tired of the board and Enoch and Daniel Levy at this point in time. And I appreciate everything that Daniel Levy's done to get the club where it is into the new stadium. I think our branding and our financials are fantastic, and that's important in this day and age. But I'm just getting the sense that this board just doesn't care about what actually happens on the pitch. I think Spurs are an investment for them. I think Spurs are nothing more than, again, a brand that they can use to profit off of eventually. And I'm getting pretty tired of that.
Yeah, I 100% agree with what you're saying. The window in hindsight's not looking great. I honestly, genuinely think that they want to sign these young players because you can go all sorts of directions with them. Hopefully they pan out, they're really good players for Tottenham, and then you can sell them. Or they pan out, they're really good players for Tottenham, and they stay. Or you're buying these players because I know damn well they wouldn't be buying them in 5 years when they're costing double, triple what it is. Yeah. So now we have to wait 5 years because the board's too cheap to buy an Archie Gray from Brentford in 4 years when he's one of the best sixes in the world. So we have to invest early. And it's a waiting game, and it's frustrating. And we need senior players. And I know that January is typically not when managers, not when the board, not when the director of football want to invest in the squad. Usually that's done in the summertime. It's kind of a fresh start. We need it so bad right now. It's not even funny. Like, we have to get 2, 3, 4 players in January if we can, and they have to be please like 23, 24. Like Dragusin is a good example. He hasn't been great this year. He's a good example last year. Got him in January and contributed to the squad, and he's more of a senior player, but he's still young, still fits our window. We need players like that in. We need a winger in. We need a center back in. We need a left back in, and we need Johnny Cardoso in if that's a possibility in January, which I think should easily get done. It's pretty much the deal is pretty much already done. So why don't we just bring him in? And that's my opinion. So we need those impact guys. Like back when we got 4th place 2022 with Conte, we brought Bentancur in, we brought Kulusevski in January, completely changed the complexion of our season. If we can do that, then we can really make a run at the Europa League, and we can really make a run at this League Cup, which will finish in March, April, when those guys have kind of been integrated. So that's just what I think. We need to invest. If we don't invest, then Ange is going to get sacked. Hopefully Ange can convince them to invest, and hopefully we can turn this season around. But January window is going to be super critical. And if Spurs are dormant during that time again, then it's just going to be an absolute dumpster fire in North London.
Well, it's interesting what you're saying. You're talking about how Spurs don't want to buy an Archie Gray 4 years from now off of Brentford when he's one of the best 60s in the world. The way that we're buying is very much a club that hangs out in the mid-table. And what I say that for is, first of all, we are mid-table. We're in 11th place, right? But we tried buying at the top of football, or acting like a big club, and we brought in Tanguy, and we brought in Lo Celso, and we've brought in Richarlison, and we've brought in whoever else, right?
Brennan Johnson,
thank you. But I'm even Sessegnon for $30-some million, right? When everybody wanted him. So we've tried to spend like the big boys and just completely fallen on our faces, right? So now we're trying something different. But when you buy these Archie Grays and you buy these Odebears, those guys have to play. If they're going to develop into what we think they can be, they have to play, right? But that's why Brentford's and Bournemouth and those types of teams are fantastic for those guys, because they're going to play, but they're not going to be good enough at 18 years old to get you to the top of the league. So like the way that we're buying is very much indicative of a mid-table side, and that happens to be exactly where we sit. So if we want to win Premier League titles, we have to start spending mad amounts of money like Premier League winning sides do. And if we're not going to do that, we're going to be right where we are. So big picture for me, this entire mess falls right at the feet of the board, right? Even if Ange is on board with these types of signings that we're making, there's no way he's stupid enough to say, I don't need $80 million guys who can come in and get me winning matches right away. He knows what it takes in the Premier League. He's not a moron, right? So this falls right at the feet of the board for me. It doesn't need to go any further than that, in my opinion. But ultimately, I think, again, you hit the nail on the head. We're buying these players who need 4 or 5 years of playing time to develop into what we think they can be. And if we're going to do that, we're not going to win enough matches right now. We're going to finish mid-table a couple of years in a row, and then maybe things start to improve.
Yeah, and I think for me, where I sit, like obviously Einik, Levy, it hasn't been good enough, and the investment hasn't been good enough. And if they were to sell and Daniel Levy was to leave, then the club would probably be in a better place. But my view on it is kind of like, it's not going to happen. It doesn't look like it's ever going to happen, or at least not now. No. So for me, I try and focus on the manager, which might be a fault of mine, because it's like it's someone that directly controls the on-pitch product to some degree. And then the players as what we can focus on. And Romero said it as well. He was like, kind of blame the players, but then he went on to aim some comments at the board. But nothing's going to happen with the board. So I understand where people are coming from. I obviously agree. I agree with you and what people are saying, but it just feels like a moot point, because it just seems like we're talking in like crazy hypotheticals. It's like it might be as likely for us to sign Jude Bellingham as it is for Einik to sell Tottenham. So I just try and focus on what's in front of us, and if they can invest in January, like you said, and bring in senior players, that would be a nice step forward for sure.
Well, yeah, I completely agree. It's all really well said. And you say, moving forward, let's talk about that. We have Southampton on the weekend. You asked me off air, what does that match look like? I can't remember the exact way you phrased the question, right? But what does the result look like against Southampton? I personally wouldn't be surprised if we come out with a draw. I said potentially a 0-0 draw, right? And I'm not asking for predictions at this point, but we got Southampton coming up this weekend. And if we don't get a result, if we do draw or even, I don't even want to say it, but lose that match, things start to get really, really messy. Southampton's a horrible team. But I could totally see a 0-0 draw in this match. I don't think we have goals in us. I could even see them conceding, right? It's unlikely. They're just very, very poor, but we also play with 1.5 defenders right now, so anything can happen.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think lineup for the game, it'll be interesting. It's probably Dragusin and Gray at the center backs, and then at the fullbacks, like, it's got to be Spence for me. Like, I think Spence has to get a look in this game. There's no excuse not to play him. Left back, Udogie, I honestly don't know. I guess it has to be him. I honestly feel sorry for him. And then we don't have any sixes, so we were talking earlier. I think it's Sarr. I personally think Bergvall and Kulusevski could go in front of him and do fairly well. And then up top, Solanke, Johnson, Son, I don't know. It's just not inspiring right now to see those guys up top. So we'll see what happens. I think it'll be along those lines. I think we can win. I think we could win like 2-1, but I wouldn't be shocked if we lose. And we just need that. Like, this is a really important game to get momentum into that game against United, which is actually important, like genuinely, to get us into a semifinal of a competition. So if we can get a little bit of momentum here and kind of ride that and maybe rotate some people here and get those guys into the cup game next week, then that would be ideal. So I'm going to go 2-1 Spurs, even in this bad time. Southampton's on 5 points. They're the worst team in the league, so we got to get it done.
Yeah, we need to. It's really important. And like you said, we need to build some momentum going into United. They're really bad. We're really bad. It's going to be, what do they say, the battle of the mid, the battle of
mid-off,
a nice mid-off in that match. I mean, they're going to have a new manager bounce that we probably won't have. And like you said, they sit above us in Europa League, but that's a super big match for this club. If we lose that match, it really, really sucks the wind out of our sails right now as an organization, I think. So it's a big one. I would be fine dropping points against Southampton if it means the result against United in that one for sure. So we'll see. And then after United, next weekend we look to Liverpool. I believe it's at Anfield, if I'm not mistaken.
I think it's at home.
It is. Okay. Well, either way, it's Liverpool, and we're getting absolutely fucking pummeled in that game.
We're getting destroyed.
Anyone will tell you differently. And we could play at the training center. We could play at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. We could play at Anfield. We could play on Mars. We're going to get fucking run off the pitch in that match without a doubt, unfortunately. So I'm riding that one off of 0 points, which is why maybe Southampton is that much more important. But at the same time, when I look to the Premier League table, I don't have any high hopes for the season. I think we finish anywhere from 7 to 10 if we're lucky, right? At this point, if we somehow got into like 6th place, that would be a miracle. There's no way we're getting 5th. Obviously, top 4 is well gone at this point. There's just too many teams around us playing well, including your Nottingham Forest, who I think we face after Liverpool. Your team like Bournemouth, Brighton, all these teams that are not as good as us on paper are well ahead of us in the league, right? So it's going to look pretty dicey. And like you said, that's why this game against United just carries so much weight. Without a doubt, we really come out and win that match.
And if we do finish 7th or like 8th, 9th, 10th, especially, and we don't win the Europa League, then it's just another year of like no European football, no Europa League. even Conference League, which are competitions that we can compete in. If we don't achieve that, then it's another year of just the league and then these 2 cups. I guess we could focus on the cups, but it just diminishes our chances of winning a trophy when we get into less competitions. It's basic math. And right now, I think we still have a chance in 3 competitions, which is good. But if the season comes to a close, no trophies and an 8th place finish, then we're just running back the same old competitions that we failed to win for the past however many years, 15, 16 years it's been. So I don't know. We just need to – something needs to happen. Something big needs to happen, that we need to have a turning point in our season. I was hoping maybe a late winner against Rangers tonight after Kulu scored, and we could kind of turn it around a bit, but that wasn't in the cards. So we'll just see. It's gonna be a roller coaster for sure.
Yeah, well, Spurs have historically been known as a cup side, and I look at the league and people will say things like, "Oh, we're in 4 to 5 years we're going to be competing for the title." Sure, maybe, but all these teams are going to get better too. Like none of these teams that we're competing with in the Premier League are going to sit dormant and watch Wilson Odebear and Archie Gray and Mikey Moore come good in these 4 to 5 years, right? And I think they all will. But I don't think we're winning the Premier League in 4 to 5 years. I don't think we're winning the Premier League in 10 years. I think the only way we win the Premier League is if the club sells and somebody comes in who is just ruthless and wants to win, right? That's how we win the Premier League. But we do have options to win cup competitions. And if we end up being a cup side, then it's better than finishing 8th and winning no trophies, right? Which is very much possible. So again, I completely agree with you. Something big needs to happen. I think if Ange can win a trophy this season, that would completely do a 180 for this club, who's in a really rough spot right now. So I believe all our eggs have to go into that basket. I think when you look at the Premier League, it's quite obvious. Again, I've said it many times on this show, nothing's coming out of the league at this point in time. So I don't want to say scrap the league. You can't do that, right? But I've said it before on the show. I think the league matches are free hits, and all our eggs have to be in these cup competitions if we want this club to not eat itself alive this season.
Yeah, and we'll see what happens with these cup competitions. I mean, next week in the quarterfinals, like you've got Newcastle, Brentford, both playing poorly this year. Obviously, you don't want Newcastle away. That's a death sentence, in my opinion. Yeah. But if you can get either of those teams at home, you've got more of a shot. Arsenal and Liverpool both are playing Champions League. Both are gunning for the league title, I guess, to some extent. And they both played in these games, and they've got league games before and after. So they could be rotating as well. I don't know how seriously they're taking the League Cup. So if one of those teams gets knocked out, the draw gets even more favorable. So there's definitely a path there. There's a path. If we were to draw like a Palace or a Brentford, where we could really make a run at the final there, and then once you get into the final, anything can happen. We're kind of due to win one of these finals. So I don't know. I think Ange's entire tenure at Spurs might rest on that United game next week. So, we'll be tapped in. We'll be here to cover it, and it's going to be intense.
Yeah, all well said. Completely agree. Last question I'll ask you before we wrap up here. We got the January window coming up. We've talked a lot about how just absolutely mid this team is. If you could sign 2 players this January window, and they can be any position, any player, who would those 2 players be? And let's say realistic too. Like, don't tell me Mbappe and Eder Militao, right? But who are the 2 players you'd bring in for this club?
Yeah, so I think on the wing I'd go Omar Marmoush, because he's just looking absolutely insane right now for Eintracht Frankfurt, and he's the exact type of player we need, who can like create for himself and just be a playmaker and be someone who can bang in goals out on the wing. It's just something that we're lacking so much. Yeah, and then for the other position, I think I would have to go with a left back. Do I have any left backs I have in mind? I don't know. I don't know if I can think of any left backs right now that I would want off the top of my head. So I would like Johnny Cardoso as well. I feel like I've said it before. It's a foregone conclusion that he's going to be at Tottenham. Just get him in right now. What's the wait for? And then, yeah, we can go from there. But I do think we need to address left back. I don't particularly know what the links are there. I think we also need to address center back. But wing for me is my number one thing. So I think Marmoush, if we can get him in, Cardoso would be awesome. And then any left back and center back that they see fit. They've been pretty good recruiting for defense recently. I think our defense was recruited pretty well. So hopefully they can figure that out again and get a good player.
No, I like the Marmoush out, and obviously I didn't give you any heads up that I was going to be asking that question, right? So I put you on the spot, but I just got to thinking. I personally, the first person I'd bring in is Mark Gahey from Crystal Palace, and there are links right now. I think he's a strong center back. I think that gives Davey some more flexibility to cover at the left back position. We also do have guys like Jed Spence and Sergio Reguilon who can play there. So yes, there's desperation and there's crisis, but there are options, right? So are we looking past solutions? Ange Postecoglou, potentially so. And again, I understand that he doesn't trust these guys, but at some point you have to do what you have to do, right? So I'd be bringing Mark Gahey in. And then up top, you dropped this bug in my ear about a month ago or maybe 2 months ago, and I love it. I'd be bringing in Brian Mbeumo from Brentford.
Yes, dude. Yes,
I think that was a great shout when you brought him up, man. I think he would be everything that we need. He's prem proven. He's powerful. He drives with the ball. He can take defenders one-on-one. I don't know for sure. I believe he's left-footed, but part of me thinks he's like somewhat ambidextrous too. And so I think he can play on either side. I'd bring him in a heartbeat. I think if we bring in – those are two Premier League proven practical signings where it's not like – oh, this guy's super flashy and star-studded coming out of another league. These are just like kind of like under the radar guys who can come in and do a really good job and help us kind of steady the ship and clean things up a little bit. And I think Mbeumo immediately starts opposite side of Sonny, and that's hard for Brendan Johnson, who's been fairly good. I mean, he's been poor in his poor run of form, but yeah, that's the two that I'd bring in a heartbeat. And you know, but ultimately we can play this game all we want. But what it's going to come down to is this club needs to have a very, very sound, a big January window, or I think things are going to look pretty messy. So we'll see. But we're 2 weeks out.
2 weeks out. The big 2 weeks.
Yep. All right, well, that's going to do it for us here at Emerald and Lilywhite. It's been episode 28. We appreciate everybody who's hung around. Again, you can find me at Scotchy Bird. You can find Max at Going Limbs. You can find us at and Lilywhite on all social media platforms. You can find also, Seattle Spurs, who we're the official YouTube channel of, at Seattle Spurs on all platforms. Also, make sure you sign up to the email subscription through Seattle Spurs at seattlespurs@gmail.com. Shoot us an email. Let us know that you'd like to be put on the email list, and you get all kinds of wonderful information around match viewings, just Spurs in general, right? It's a wonderful asset, and we appreciate Steve, our chairman, who puts all the work in. Also, make sure you check out our home pubs up north, the Wits End and Finney Ridge, and then down south we've got Cascades and we've got Rainier Growlers, both our homes. So you've got 3 places to go watch Spurs with fellow Seattle Spurs supporters. Make sure you get down, tip your bartender as well, and as always, come on, you Spurs.
Come on, you Spurs.